Hello again. Happy 4th of July, Independence Day. I figure I would talk a little bit about avionics. At this point, at the community college, we really do not have that many avionics students enrolled. Matter of fact, we hardly ever have over a handful, but I do notice that there's more of an interest online. So, uh, what I'm going to do today is update us a little bit on the aircraft electronics technician certification that many of us have. There has been some changes, and that's what I should talk about today. All right, let's start with the avionics technician certification, which is actually put out by AET in connection with uh, the NCATT. The AEA, in a continuing effort to promote the avionics industry and the value and rewards of an avionics technician career, petitioned the FAA to recognize the scope and details contained in the NCATT AET certification as an acceptable means of compliance to the formal education option as listed in Title 14 CFR, Section 65101. All right, here we go. 65101. They're talking about the education requirements here in A5, specifically A5 Roman numeral 2. Overall, this is your eligibility for a repairman certificate. Normally, you do that when you are with an employer who specializes in the type of equipment that we're looking for certifications on. So, overall, if you do work for, let's say, an avionics shop, there is going to be a preference for someone who has the certifications. And the certifications in general, it looks like we have 5 requirements. You have to be at least 18 years of age, be specially qualified to perform maintenance on aircraft or components, which would be the avionics components, and sometimes you're actually in the aircraft to access those components. And it's got to be appropriate to the job for which you're employed. So if you're not, your employer does not deal with a certain type of equipment, that gives you no special qualifications for that equipment. You have to be employed. That's the requirement of a repairman certificate. It doesn't go with you. It stays in effect with the employer. So number 3, you have to be employed for a specific job requiring those special qualifications by a certificated repair station or by a commercial operator like an airline or an air carrier. Number 4, you're recommended for certification by your employer. Have at least 18 months of practical experience or complete formal training that is acceptable to the administrator and is specifically designed to qualify the applicant for the job on which the applicant is to be employed. And normally, what has been acceptable to the administrator has been the AET plus 1 endorsement. Of course, the last requirement, either being able to read, write, speak, and understand the English language, which is very handy in a lot of different occupations, including this one. Aircraft certification system. So the steps to getting this AET certified, and let me show you what that is. All right, I'm going to put mine here on the screen, and it's a certification. It basically certifies you as an aircraft electronics technician. So it states that I have successfully completed a qualifying examination for certification as an AET. This is kind of an extra that an A&P mechanic may pursue. More so in the past. I don't see it as much in the present. Now the back of it, I wonder if we can make this a little larger. There we go. So it identifies when you got your certificate or your endorsement, or in this case, a certification. The Aircraft Electronics Technician, the AET, in this case was awarded June 4th, 2019, which July 4th is today, 2023 when I'm recording this. So that's 4 years later. So I've had it for 4 years and 1 month. There's also endorsements, which at this point the AET was somewhat new. It goes back to the where they even started to have this type of testing available to avionics students. Prior to that, we've mostly relied on the FCC element type testing, which is definitely radio heavy. And you'll notice my more recent YouTube videos are where I'm covering element 1. So for the very beginning part of avionics, we're looking at the element 1. And you can go back and look at those videos. I believe I've got one for each of the key topics, so 24 in total. All right, so you'll also notice that there's these endorsements that they list. Autonomous navigation systems, dependent navigation systems, onboard communication and safety systems, and radio communication systems. And that's in order to get AET certified, pass the so first you get AET certified, and then if you want, you can pass one or more of the following of the 4 endorsements. And a lot of the forms are going to be available here on the website. So if I say the AET certified, let's get a look at a little information for that. All right, so they are pointing out that now there's a 5-year expiration on the certifications on the AET. When I got it and all other early adopters got the certification, it was for a lifetime, similar to the A&P and a few of the other aviation certifications that you can get. There are certain exceptions, like the inspection authorization through the FAA that expires after 2 years, and there is a currency requirement that has to be met each year. So it looks like the NCATT is going the same direction. So for those certifications that were issued prior to January 1st, 2022, which is now almost about a year and a half ago, the certifications will remain valid until January 1st, 2027. And at that point, everybody's certification will need to be renewed. And to read more about that policy, that's basically why don't I just go ahead and click here. There's a little bit of background. Did I say 2012? 2014. Basically, ASTM absorbed the aviation technician certification that was provided by the National Center for Aerospace and Transportation Technologies, and they had a testing certification that was set up by various project grants. Now, that wasn't that long ago. That's not even 10 years ago. A committee was in effect created to do the oversight for the NCATT programs, and in 2017 there was an agreement with Space Tech Partners to actually conduct the exams, and that's still true today. And for everyone who's gotten it since 2017, you would have gotten it through Space Tech. So the exams offered were the AET, and you can get some information on, get a book by going to this link. At one point, I'll go ahead and look into that a little deeper for you. I've already got mine, so at this point I'm not as motivated to cover how to get one initially. I certainly will, but it's not going to be one of the first things I do. Some of those people already have the certification, and you might be wondering, what am I going to do? Am I just going to let it lapse, which it still looks like you have a certificate, so there is some of that, but it's not going to be that difficult to renew it. So there's a couple different ways of doing that, and one of them is what I'm going to recommend is adding one AET endorsement during every renewal period. So let's take a look at the little more information here. The recertification every 5 years. All right, so what do we have here? So in that meeting, they did decide to grandfather in the existing NCATT periods based on the new period of recertification, and the expiration date is going to be January 1st of 2027. They'll send out an email and they're going to do that if you got your certificate since that date. And here's basically, you're going to have these four options. You can either supply a properly completed work verification form as evidence of your currency. So that's if you continue to practice it or instruct it. You can fill out this form. That option documents work in the field of certification in at least 18 of the prior 60 months. So during the prior 5-year renewal period, you have had about a year and a half of the work verification. Or there's going to be an alternative method which you can get currency credits, and there's going to be a table on the website. Number 3, you successfully earn at least one of the AET endorsements, which is what I'm going to recommend here. So my next series of videos are going to be on these endorsements. The AET currently has 4 endorsements. The DNS, we talked about these before. These are navigation systems that are dependent on something. Autonomous, which are basically self-controlled. Radio communication systems, which is a pretty broad area, but if you've already taken your element 3, you're probably going to be somewhat familiar with a lot of the requirements for radio. And then 4th one, which I'm not exactly sure on, an onboard communication and safety systems. Now that one I'd have to look a little closer at. That is one of the main 4. Onboard communication, does that mean communicating with the back of the cabin, the onboard PA system, for instance? Or is that what communication systems that you have on board an aircraft? I'm going to kind of presume it's the latter, because you're not going to have a whole certification just on how to work the intercom. So it has to be what communications and safety systems are on board the aircraft. And that would be very similar to the radio communication, but there's other communication systems that I guess you would have to look at. That one, that's why I say I'm going to have to look at that one a little closer. If you're unable to meet one of those requirements and your certification expires and you want to later renew it, you have to, in effect, take the exam over again. So we don't really want to do that. So if you can just pick up an endorsement, or if you're working, you would probably have to comment yourself as to how in the field that this applies to you. Because if you are an educator, you already have the first part met. All right, I'm going to use this as beyond the AET. Navigation, communication, and installation. So it's already going to cover some of our endorsements. By Tom Inman, you can get this at Avatech. What is it? Wires Cove, Virginia. Wires Cave, Virginia. Most of us that have looked at this are pretty big fans of the book, so this is what we're going to be going over. This is the second book in their avionics series. It covers the material required for the AET endorsements, the radio communication systems, dependent and autonomous navigation systems. So it's basically the four that we're going to be studying. I'm confident. You notice they don't mention the onboard. All right, so they're mostly talking about the three. I guess they're still not quite up on the onboard communication and safety systems, which I can pretty much cover the content if there's nothing else available by the time we get to that. All right, so the contents, basic electronics review, that is more for the AET. I don't think you're going to be seeing too many more pure electronics questions. Certainly we'll spend some time and circle back and talk about electronics, but at this point we're going to move right into the radio, the radio communication systems endorsement would be chapters 2 and 3 and maybe 4. This also kind of ties in with the onboard communication when they're talking about aviation radio. So I think if we take these 3 chapters, add in some safety systems, we're pretty good for those 2 endorsements. But at this point, we're just going to study it with an eye towards getting the radio communication systems endorsement. There's a chapter on dependent navigation systems. That's an endorsement by itself. Chapter 6 is going to be autonomous navigation systems. That's another AET endorsement by itself. And then the installation, which is going to be mostly chapter 8. If you want to go ahead and purchase that book and read it at your own pace, but otherwise what I'm going to do is put it side by side on the screen and then look at typical test questions. All right, so appreciate you guys coming back. Thank you for the support so far, and I hope this one works out. So welcome aboard.